This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien kicks off today's show discussing the current state of the markets as he talks through the futures and cash prices. Keeping the show rolling is K-State Extension beef veterinarian A.J. Tarpoff as he shares his reminders for preparing calving kits and upcoming calving schools. Chip Redmond, K-State meteorologist, concludes today's show explaining the recent cold temperatures, if they will continue, and when we can be expecting potentially more winter precipitation. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show with a grain market update from K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. Daniel, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
Daniel, wanting to take a current look at the state of our markets and beginning with futures, what are we seeing?
Well, we've seen sideways markets generally without major changes. When you look at the corn market in particular, corn futures market, we are now, of course, in the delivery period for the December contract. That closed yesterday, Thursday, December the 4th, at 437 and a quarter. But the March contract, the lead contract now for most cash prices in grain elevators, closed at 446 and a half, actually up 3 cents. The D's was up 5 some, but again, when you're in delivery, you got pulling and pushing of people trying to get out of the market, and things just happen as they happen. So you got at 446 for the March contract. It's interesting when you look out to D's 26 corn, the new crop harvest contract for next year, that it's at 464 and a half, fully, well, about 30 to 27 cents above this year's contract. So how much uncertainty do we have in the market going forward that to get some measure of that? Well, about 25 to 30 cents worth. That's kind of what the market is valuing that uncertainty at. In recent, for that March contract, we'd gotten down to about 435 or so within the last week. And that had followed a high of about 450. So now, as so often happens, you look at the recent high and the recent low, and where are we at right now? Well, we're about right in the middle of where that was. Again, closed yesterday for that contract at 447 and a half and a quarter. Try to watch some technical elements when the markets don't know exactly what's coming at them from a supply-demand fundamentals point of view. We watch the trends and some technical indicators. I try to watch the relative strength indices for these contracts, and we have a RSI of just about 54%, and 54 is between 0%, which means it's in a free fall, and 100%, which means it's shooting to the moon. So we're at about 53. We're about in the middle, and most of the time you'll find those contracts spending a lot of time between 30 and 70. So we're going sideways to slightly higher on that contract, and just is what it is. Looking at futures, for the futures contract close yesterday, the January contract at 11.19 and 3/4, up 4 cents. Again, when you look at where November 26 is, just as for corn, we look at way out the next year to see what the new crop contract is, just for comparison. And November beans, 2026 beans are 11.14 and 3/4, actually about a nickel below where we're at right now. So giving some indication that the market not really having a clear direction for what changes might occur. And there's lots that we could talk about with regard to what's happening in South America, what anticipation of crop size is, what anticipation of their usage would be, particularly with their exports to China that are anticipated in the coming year. And what announcements I have seen in the last week, I guess in the market news, quoting industry sources down in Brazil, is that, well, they anticipate fully continued growth, but they always anticipate continued growth. And a lot of that has to do with deforestation and what rate they're going at with all that. But again, so you look at that January contract for beans and closed again 11.19 and a half or three quarters. Just depends how you look at it. As they kind of close all of that up in the trade clearinghouse, but we had been as high as about 1170 within the last 2 weeks. And it come down to again about 1118, 1119. So if anything, now we're down towards the low of the recent trend of the recent trading range. Had been as low as about 1070. When you go back and look at the patterns in that January futures contract and most of that futures complex, you see a sizable, noticeable gap where we jumped from relatively lower prices moving to the high side, and that happened around the beginning of November. So we're still well above that, and there's still the hope, I think, of China coming in, fulfilling its trade negotiations, agreed upon quantities of purchases, and the statement from this week from a U.S. government official was that they're right on pace to do that. And there has been some buying. We'll see where all that goes. I would say that the relative strength indices also for beans had been as high during that run up that had where we topped out about 2 weeks ago. We'd gotten up to about 80 or so on the RSI, and now we're slightly positive, about 51 and a half for that ratings. At this time, no gangbusters movements. I think you'd have to see crop problems in South America and strong China or other countries' export purchases from the U.S. to see a lot of change there. And finally, for wheat, that isn't a time of year for a lot happening in wheat, at least not in these recent years when we've been struggling on the export side. But you did see hard red winter wheat futures, the March contract closed at 534 yesterday, up about 4.5 cents, and the July contract actually a bit higher, about 25 cents higher, up to 557 and three quarters, and again slightly positive. So not a lot happening there right now. Still watching the pace of hard red winter wheat exports, and as the USDA tries to continue to catch up on their reporting of what happened from the government closure time. And the reports I've seen of late still have been positive. We had maintained the hard red winter wheat export pace through several weeks of that of the government shutdown at what were pretty low prices. So buyers had a good situation going in that they could come in and buy, keep moving wheat, not have a lot of market reporting coming on at that time to kind of reveal any large changes in the market. So things were working out pretty good at that time. And then when you look at the hard red winter wheat on the futures charts, just as you and I have been talking about, Shelby, for about the last, well, since in essence March of this year, we've been having this ongoing downtrend. There's a time during June, July, of course, around harvest when we had some interruption of that. Generally, a long-term downtrend had bottomed out. It looks like in about the end of October, beginning of November, it had gone to down to just around $5 or so. Now we're at on yesterday's close at 534, kind of a tortured path higher. Initial run up to about 550 or so there in the first part of November. Then since that time, some ups and downs, and find ourselves now with an RSI index also just hanging around 50%, about 49%. Had been up as high during that early November rally as basically 90%. So we're sitting right now in December, end of the year, with inventories as they are, and people making decisions. Some related to taxes, some related to storage, et cetera. And we've had some slight positive news in the market, but not a lot moving on. I really do think that we are looking forward to the January 12th USDA WASDE report. And when you look at all the information that'll be released at that time, we'll have information on the winter wheat seedings numbers. We'll have info on grain stocks. Grain stocks numbers will give us a check on the size of previous year's crops and the degree of feed grain feeding and some feeding of wheat as well. So we'll be watching that. We'll have year-end crop production reports, especially numbers that are still somewhat contentious, although you just kind of have to take what the market's trading on for corn yields, for soybean yields, et cetera, and act upon that on the supply side. But still, there's still the possibility of changes in that corn yield number still for our consideration. So January the 10th, again, time of surprise there. And then, of course, the World Ag Supply Demand Estimates, WASDE reports that'll be coming out. From there, we'll see where the market would go. I think my own anticipation would be that probably continued moderation in that corn number, probably not any great, big, huge surprise. I guess folks in our business and agriculture love to talk, and you hear every rumor that gosh, the corn yields weren't as much as they thought over in parts of the Eastern Corn Belt or not, and you just have to say, well, maybe you're right. But until we get some official confirmation, we can't really trade on those numbers very well. And I guess I'd finish up quickly. We only have just a little bit left. Cash markets actually for corn have improved some. We've got in the Garden City area, we're at 422 as the highest price that I could see yesterday on a close. 437 actually in Pittsburgh. That was one bid that was pretty high, others lower. So we've weathered most of harvest. We've settled at around $4 for cash corn, plus or minus some. Grain sorghum, we are seeing some evidence, especially in the Hutchinson area, of a few large bids coming in. To me, I associate those with the possibility of train loads for export for sorghum. I just wouldn't be surprised if that's happening. Soybeans, some ups and downs. The best bids in Topeka, Pittsburgh areas in particular, well, and also Salina around the export areas, 1045 to 1059, something like that. So we'll see where that goes. And for wheat, again, 494 Salina, 494 Topeka, 489 Hutchinson, the top bids in the state, and more like 430, 425 elsewhere. So we're just in a situation where we're post-harvest and waiting for things to happen. And from now until we get out to spring, it's all going to be based on demand and what the USDA reports finally find on the supply side.
Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much, Shelby. Take care.
That was K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show with reminders and things to start getting ready for calving with K-State Extension beef veterinarian AJ Tarpoff. AJ, thanks for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to be on.
AJ, when we're thinking about calving, maybe more specifically for spring calving herds, what are some things they could be doing right now?
I think right now is an excellent opportunity to do an inventory. It's just prior to calving season. The first calf hasn't hit the ground. You've got some time here in December, hopefully, that it's a good time to get an inventory of all of your calving equipment. When's the last time you used it? When's the last time you took a look at it? And for most operators, it hasn't even been thought about since, last April. So it's been sitting around for several months. It's a good time as any to be able to get everything together. Make sure that if you need to fix, replace, clean, any and all of those things, now's a great time to do it. I do recommend putting together your calving kit and being prepared for it. You know where it is. Other members of the team, folks in the household, whoever's going to be working on your operation, everybody knows where the equipment is. They know what's in it and understand this is where you clean it. This is where kind of what the protocol is, so to speak. So that goes into chains. It goes into handles. If you use a calf jack, making sure that everything is in proper functional order, making sure that nothing needs to be fixed, greased, or replaced. But other basic things, making sure that you have esophageal bottles. So if you're going to be using an esophageal feeder for something like a colostrum replacer, well, nothing's more difficult than trying to get some colostrum into a cold calf early in the calving season and you can't find the bottle. So it's a good idea to have that prepared, having it ready. Just for basic biosecurity purposes, I do recommend for all operations to make sure you have more than one set of bottles. One esophageal feeder in a bottle for healthy newborn cattle, and then maybe a bottle and esophageal feeder for sick animals that may have scours later in the calving season. No matter how good you clean it, it's good to keep a line of separation and keep those things so we don't get cross-contamination. So inventory, I think that just the pure equipment, and I mentioned esophageal feeders, that also includes colostrum replacers. So wherever you purchase those products, whether it's your feed store, your local veterinarian, making sure that you have at least some of that on hand. The commercial products that are labeled as a replacer, are really the way to go. They are expensive, but guess what? With calves worth upwards to $1,000 as a wet calf, that's a cheap investment in that animal's future to make sure that if you need it, it's there and it's ready to go. So that would be my first recommendation is making sure that we go do an inventory.
There are many different brands of colostrum replacer. Is there things that producers should make sure is included in that ingredient list to make sure they're getting the best for their animal?
Right. One of those things that I look for is making sure that it is labeled as a colostrum replacer. There are other types of products on the market that are marketed as supplements that don't have quite the level of antibodies or immunoglobulins that the animal needs. Those are the active immune cells that typically would get passed from mom to calf. And with these commercial products, they make sure and they verify that there's a certain level of antibody available in it. If you're using a good replacer product, it would have 100 IgG or higher as the dosage rate for that. So that's something to look for, regardless of the brand, regardless of who makes it. But at least getting 100 IgG into that calf in the first 2 to 4 hours of life would be really important. But after that, I think the next thing that I would do is I mentioned inventory. Well, what about our equipment? What about our facilities? Many folks have, a calving area or maybe a calving pasture or something along those lines. If those animals are not moved into that location yet, making sure that you go through it, making sure that there aren't any fence work that needs to be done, make sure that we don't get those escapee calves that get born next to the fence and end up on the wrong side of the fence or get through a small water gap. So make sure everything's tight, secure, ready to go. But also those calving facilities. A lot of operators may have a head catch or something along those lines in a barn, and realistically, they only get used during calving season. So it's a good time to go through. If anything broke down last year, now's a good time to be able to fix, replace, re-weld, reconstruct if necessary. But now's the time to start going through some of those things.
You mentioned scours earlier, and what else should producers maybe have on hand when it comes to caring for the calves and being able to help identify what is wrong with my animal?
Well, really, right now, looking forward into the winter, I think number one issue early in life with these young calves is one, colostrum. We talked about making sure they get colostrum, but hypothermia. So if we're calving early in the winter, if we look back the last several years, February has been a really cold month. We've had blizzards, we've had snowstorms, we've had ice storms. Those newborn calves can get chilled quick. So I think one thing that I would definitely recommend is having a rectal thermometer in your calving kit. Make sure you travel out in your pickup. You're going to check cattle or side by side, you have that thermometer with you. Those little digital thermometers you can get just about anywhere. They work fantastic. But with that, how are you going to use it? Well, if that calf is looking lethargic, looking a little cold on a really cold morning, is it hypothermic? Well, is it dry? If it's still a little damp and really looking cold, that thermometer will tell you, if it's below 100 degrees Fahrenheit, that calf needs some help. Whether that's riding around in the floorboard of your pickup for a little while, using some of a hot box or something, something similar to be able to warm up that calf. So being prepared, having all of those things on hand, I think is very important. But I think, you mentioned health. Any young calf issue, whether it's scours, whether it's maybe you have some concern if a calf has bacteria going through its system called septicemia. Any of those issues, talk to your local veterinarian. If they want to put together a protocol for you in your operation, that local veterinarian is the go-to place for that information to be able to have any products that you may need on hand and be ready to handle any of those issues regardless of the day. Because if it's Sunday night at 9 p.m., chances are no place is open and you're not going to be able to get in to get anything last minute. So having those things on hand, prepared, you know how to use them with prior communication to your veterinarian through a VCPR, that's really the best route.
We've talked about having things in that calving kit for the calf, but is there anything we should consider for the dam?
For the dam, the big thing is, again, working with your veterinarian, being prepared for what we call retained placenta. So in some circumstances, the dam may not pass the entire placenta after the calving process. When that happens, it can lead to some issues called metritis, where we can get infection on the inside of the uterus. And really, our whole purpose of treatment is trying to control infection to heal up that uterus to ensure breed back later on in the year. So again, there's wonderful products that are out there. Usually we're treating with systemic antibiotics, but working with your veterinarian, having that protocol in place, and when that's necessary, understanding when and who to treat is very important.
So AJ, apart from the calving process, what are the records that you'd recommend someone write down when that calf has hit the ground?
Yeah, so records, always very important. So this is really up to the producer. And I think all records are very important, just keeping track of who calved, who is the mother. But really, those records can go a long way if you're willing to put in the effort. You can track, okay, how many years in a row did the same cow have issues calving? If you're having issues with dystocia, is it the same cow? What is her body condition score? You can get a weight on the calf. I know a lot of our purebred operators are very accustomed to getting all of those records first thing. As soon as that calf comes out of the womb, they're getting a birth weight. They're getting some other measurements and things like that. But even for commercial operators, identifying the dam, identifying if you had any calving issues, identifying if there was any problems with the calf, bull or heifer. Again, all of those things are very important for an operation. If you use the data correctly. And I think a lot of operators do, and they're very good. Even the little red calving book can go a long way just to identify all those animals. If you're looking for a calving book and don't have access to one or haven't seen one, we do have one through our K-State Extension bookstore. So we do have a calving book that's available for download or for purchase, where it's easy to fit in your pocket. You can run around, where you can make sure you check off all those cows that give birth, and you can get some of that critical information to be able to help your operation grow into the future.
If people want to learn more about this and other things related to calving, what's some upcoming opportunities?
Yeah, we've got our yearly calving school circuit getting ready to get jump started here in Kansas. Really excited about this. We've been doing this for close to 10 years now in Kansas. We've been putting on this calving school circuit, but it's kicking off here in December with locations in Ashland and Larned. So if you're in those locations or interested in those first two here in December, RSVPs are coming up. So December 5th for Ashland, December 12th for Larned. And if those don't work for you, they're not in your region, not to worry. We have 3 more locations happening in January. For more information on all of those calving schools, as well as locations, RSVP information, and dates, go to ksubeef.org or contact your local extension office and they'll be able to help you out.
AJ, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
That was K-State Extension beef veterinarian AJ Tarpoff. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Friday show with a weather update from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chip, what happened to our warm weather?
Well, the calendar officially turned to December is pretty much what happened. And December is the start of meteorological winter. And December, January, February are the 3 months we consider true winter, at least in the weather community. If you look at the astronomical calendar, it's slightly different, but that's besides the point. We definitely have felt some colder air. And the first wave kind of came late last weekend and on Monday. The second wave came here on Thursday morning. And both of them brought really cold temperatures compared to what we were in November. Right now, a lot of places, final numbers are still kind of coming in for what November ended up being, but it was a warm month, no matter how you slice it across the state. And so we finally were able to tap into some Arctic cold and bring it far enough south that we saw low temperatures in the single digits. We actually broke the 0-degree mark. Both Scandia in North Central and Rossville in the Kansas River Valley, they both dropped to 0, and Scandia dropped to sub-0. So finally some real cold, and that's good for folks that were hoping to send winter wheat into dormancy. I know the cold's been good for for at least freezing up some of the damp ground. Before this cold event, we had a fair amount of precipitation last week, just after Thanksgiving, with rainfall as much as over an inch in places around the northern Flint Hills. We had up to an inch there just south of Topeka, and an inch over by Kansas City. And north central, only about a quarter inch or so. And we got the central Flint Hills, Chase County area is kind of the southern line or east-west line, about a half inch. So a good shot of moisture. We got a good subsurface soil moisture profile for most of the state now. And so we could freeze that topsoil. We kind of lock that subsurface soil moisture in. And we also reduced the mud. I know things are getting pretty muddy, and some folks are calving this time of year. And mud and cold don't tend to go together.
You mentioned freezing temperatures, which means livestock producers probably having to break waters. And are we going to get a break from that for some people in Kansas?
Yeah, we've been, soil temperatures have been into that 30-degree mark, and that's kind of the threshold there for some surface water, but also any pump the water is going to have to quickly freeze when it's exposed to these temperatures. As you look forward into the future, we're right on the edge. We're right on the edge of warmer temperatures that are building to the west, with high pressure across much of the western United States and southwestern United States. And that heat's slowly building, and it's not like extremely anomalous heat, and we're not talking like 70s, 80s, but it's just warmer than normal. Average highs should be somewhere in the mid 40s, and they're about 60s is what it looks like. So that's to our southwest, and to our northeast, a lot colder temperatures, right? A lot of snowpack, and that Arctic air is funneling in from the northwest. And so we're kind of in that battleground. We're going to stay in the cooler side, at least to start the weekend. And then by the end of the weekend, early next week, temperature is going to start to increase as that high pressure from the west shifts eastward. And that'll bring us up to the 50s and even some 60s into next weekend, and potentially even further. What that does mean, too, is overall dry conditions. That high pressure won't have any moisture within it, locked in it, not like we see in the summertime in those high pressures, and will be overall dry through the middle of the month. My focus kind of then turns to later in the month. So folks that are excited about White Christmas might get excited a little bit. There is some reason to be excited. It does look like the high pressure breaks down, and we get another push of Arctic air, potentially by just before that Christmas time period. And that looks to bring maybe another shot of colder temperatures, more seasonable temperatures. Typically that initial storm that is on the leading edge of that cold is fairly substantial. And so starting to see some of the pattern recognition of that occurring before Christmas, which wouldn't be good for travel. We obviously saw some big travel impacts over the weekend with the previous storm in the Midwest. So another thing to just kind of keep an eye out. But until then, things are going to be rather quiet and benign.
Chip, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
That was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Monday.